the activities and then what you're doing the day leading up to your slumber of that night, getting fancy with the word slumber, uh, impacts the roller coaster or smoothness of that night, right?
Mhm.
So, with that type of statement, what you do during the day impacts what happens at night. We were kind of talking about how this transition of low and insulin sensitivity and the dangers of low blood sugar, but how can that look the other way around, or maybe in third and fourth categories? What else can a statement like that be true to?
Yeah, so it's like you gotta think about what is going to be affecting your blood sugar going into the night. So you have, like we talked about, the things that are gonna impact insulin sensitivity. So those are gonna be activity, like we talked about. So if you had a high amount of activity relative to your normal day, so some people have a high amount of activity every day. So for them, their basal rate's already dialed in for that. So it's not a big deal for them. However, if you are a more sedentary person and or you just go and do something that's a lot more physical than you normally do that day, you may think about doing things to help mitigate that drop that may end up happening in the night. Because oftentimes, especially if that activity is later in the day, your insulin sensitivity has now increased, meaning that you don't need as much insulin to have that same effect of lowering your blood sugar. And therefore, if you maintain the same level of basal rate that you always do, typically that means you're going to start dropping low. So you
Mm-hmm.
may play with those basal rates in the night and say, I had a lot of activity today. Don't really want to drop low in the middle of the night because I like my sleep. Then maybe you drop your basal rates, and that's going to depend on every person how much you want to drop that. And again, data is king, and we want more data to figure out how much we need to do that by. But that's something to think about as far as activity levels go. And
Mm-hmm.
then at the same time, your diet. For me, my diet is huge as far as going into my sleep, and I have different basal settings programmed in my pump that allow me to change based off of what my diet looks like that day. Because sometimes it's a fairly extreme change where I do somewhat of an intermittent fast where I stop eating around, between 1 and 3 p.m. And then there's other days where I'm not intermittent fasting. And so I'm eating later into the evening. And that has a big impact on my insulin requirements through the night. And so, like when I do that intermittent fasting, I can drop my insulin almost in half at night because I don't need nearly as much. And then on those days that I eat later at night, I need to make sure I change those settings so that way I'm not also really high now when I sleep, and therefore waking up more and more. So you have to think about what your day has looked like and how that's going to then affect your sleep before you go and go off on your own and unmonitor your diabetes for 8 hours or however long you're
Right.
sleeping.
Yeah, that's a good way to frame it too. From the very first thing that we said, you are then giving up complete control to the randomness of diabetes if you're not preparing in these ways,
Hmm.
and no one is checking in on that, and that is something that requires constant check-in. So that's a great way to put that first point. uh and the second thing you were saying was your diet and things like intermittent fasting. Now, I don't think we've even had an episode about intermittent fasting before, and fasting, right? We haven't done one like that
I don't
yet.
think so. Not that I remember.
I'm 99% sure we have not. And there's a lot of cool, both Grady and I are fans of intermittent fasting. We'll have a deep dive on that and some other time.
Hmm.
But what's cool about your pump is that you have settings for these different modes. And but instead of just going back on the pump and the settings and the basal rate train, once again, you say highlighting how important it is to recognize the foods you eat and the control you have and the timing of the meals during the day will end up impacting your blood sugar at night. And
Hmm.
not just the sleep quality in terms of the physiology of it all, but then the physiology of the blood sugar, which is what we're really talking about here, not just the overall sleep quality, We're talking about how those things affect your blood sugar at night.
Yeah, and the intermittent fasting is just an example. It could be also the types of food that you're eating.
Mm-hmm.
So like if I decide to eat late at night and I end up eating some vegetables versus eating like a big heavy meal with lots of protein or lots of fat, then that's going to have a much different effect on my blood sugar and on my basal rates. At the same time, if you eat like a piece of pizza or a whole pizza for supper or even as soon as supper. So, like, say your supper is at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock. That's late enough that it can affect your blood sugar pretty much through the night.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something you have to take into account. But then you take that to the extreme and you eat that right before you go to bed. Yeah, that's definitely going to affect your blood sugar through the night
Mm-hmm.
and it can have a big effect. So, that's also things to think about when you're making those decisions, whether it be on the insulin side of things or the pure food choice. It's like, is it worth eating this food right now and sacrificing my blood sugar control, or should I just not eat it and that way I keep my settings the same? I don't have to worry about my blood sugar through the night because I know it'll be good. Sometimes that in and of itself is enough reason to say, okay, I'm not going to have that food because it's just going to be a lot easier if I just
Right.
don't.
Yeah, it's almost like to put it in more of context, let's say you've never had a certain type of food or brand of food or combination of foods at close to nighttime before. In this type of advice, it would be then logical if you've never done it before, it would be advisable to not eat it close to bedtime because once you're asleep and you can't fix it,
Mm-hmm.
then it can be one of the two things. You'll either be or three things. You'll be good, low chance probability, um, a little bit higher chances you'll overcorrect and you'll have low blood sugar. Still
Mm-hmm.
a good chance, but a lower possibility than the third option, which is the highest possibility that you're not going to be giving your insulin correctly, and whether it be the timing of it or the amount of it or both, and you will end up high because of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's the highest probability when you have something. Now, I will take a step laterally and say, because I probably I differ more on Grady at this point. Just there is a something to be said about restriction of food and lifestyle overall, and the quality of life of living life. And if you're always making those decisions, it can possibly create uh, situations where you could maybe create eating disorders or bad relationships with food if you're always restricting yourself. Like to say you will never to take our that advice I said a minute ago fully at heart, to never have something new like an hour or two before bedtime ever in the rest of your life, whether you're 10 years old listening to this or even 70, 80 years old that has 20 years of life to live, 30 plus, that's unrealistic to say like you would never try something new close to bed.
Mm-hmm.
And so don't limit yourself to that. But ideally, in a perfect world, the short term satisfaction of trying something like that doesn't mean you can't have something, but I just want to bring the reality of sometimes you need to make the decision and just be wary of the consequences of high or low and the low chance that you nail it on the head.
Mm-hmm.
Or you make the smart decision. Maybe you wait till the next day or do something and you have it a little bit later, just not before bed, because once you go to sleep, that's it. You can't fix it.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah, I think ultimately the point is like understand that that is a consequence. So whether
mm-hmm,
you choose to or not,
mm-hmm,
um, that's ultimately something you want to think about before
right.
making that decision.
Mm-hmm,
Um, because like you said, we differ on opposite sides because I'm very
mm-hmm,
much like I feel much more free when my diabetes is much easier to
right.
control. Sometimes you feel more free when you're able to eat whatever you want.
Right, right. And that that differ continues to increase the longer
Yes.
we're not living together. Your claws and me are starting to come out.
Yep.
And the true Garrett is coming about. I don't know why I said it like that.